All right, welcome everybody to episode 41 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, a partner here at Thoughtium, and I'm going to be introducing part of our team here in a moment, and an extremely exciting topic for us to unpack today. We go live to LinkedIn and all other social media channels every Thursday at 3 o'clock. And we want to welcome everybody who is joining. I know we have a few teammates who will be in the Zoom room. We have a few guests who have registered to attend live. You all can say hello and ask questions in chat box as we move through today's program. We also want to welcome those folks who join us from our LinkedIn community. We have a great community within LinkedIn that stop by and either see our content live or maybe you see it in your feed post. And we would love for you all to say hello. I'll be taking a look at the comments section throughout as well too. We broadcast to Facebook and YouTube as well. You can find all of our content at thoughtium.com/live, as well as today's episode. And without further ado, let's get into it. I'm extremely excited about today's episode. You know, we started Navigating Now almost a year ago at the doorstep of the pandemic, and we have a very unique opportunity today to take a look at those learning and development trends that have affected us as corporate citizens, have affected us as leaders within organizations. And I have two incredible learning practitioners with us today in Madison Wright and Melissa Noonan. Madison and Melissa are both part of the Thoughtium Learning and Development team. They are just incredible thought leaders in the space. They've been in the work over the course of the last year. And I would say more than anything, they are practitioners in learning and development. So Madison and Melissa, welcome. We'll introduce you here in just a moment. As I mentioned, if folks have questions for Madison and Melissa throughout, you can post them in chat and also in the comments section in LinkedIn. So today we are covering off on the future of learning, and we do this every year. We unpack the future of learning by way of identifying those learning and development trends that are impacting us as adult learners and that are impacting the learning and development community. I know we have a handful of folks that tune in who are learning professionals themselves, whether you're on the HR side of things or maybe on the commercial side of things. And today is all about us as a learning community. How can we stand at the doorstep of where we're at today, here a year into this pandemic, and look up and out and identify those trends that will be impacting our work on a day-to-day basis? So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists, our guests for today, and we're going to start with Madison Wright. Madison Wright is a consultant here at Thoughtium. Again, she is a practitioner. I'm going to go ahead and share this slide. You know, we talk about practitionership as treating your work like an art form or a craft. So Madison, say hello, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your practitionership.
All right. Anthony, I am really excited to be here and talking about the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report and just diving into other trends that we're seeing. So in terms of my practitionership, especially here at Thoughtium, is helping people tap into their potential through their work. So really tap into how can I show up as a best contributor, a great designer, a great leader. So really finding ways to help people optimize really how they show up at work. In terms of specifically what that looks like, especially through our work, I love playing in the experience design space. So thinking of how we can enable someone through learning, practice, connection with other people to really just allow people to take on new skills, realize how they want to grow, and go and tackle that.
Wonderful. I just love hearing about everybody's, version of practitionership. It's so different, especially us learning leaders. We carry so many roles, and Madison, I've seen firsthand your work in designing and delivering great learning experiences. So thank you for being a part of today's discussion. All right. We would now like to introduce our second panelist today, also a member of the Thoughtium team, Melissa Noonan. She's a managing consultant here at Thoughtium. Melissa, say hello and talk a little bit about your practitionership.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It is great to be here, Anthony. I'm super excited because I get to watch everybody do this weekly, and here we are on the stage, and how exciting to be together as a team. So this is great. I love this practitionership statement concept. I know it's something that we practice here at Thoughtium, and it's challenging when you haven't done it before. So, I really put some brain cycles to this when I started, and I think being able to speak to this is really wonderful. For me, I really enjoy helping companies develop engaged and vibrant workforces. My focus is really helping people enable the workforce and the strategy. So I really want to make sure that people are connecting with what the business strategy is, and really making sure that we can, as L&D practitioners, help to really solve some complex problems that really kind of elevate businesses. So that's where I get my energy, just in terms of kind of working day to day.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And again, it's been great to see your practitionership, particularly over the course of the last year. I know the three of us and the entire team at Thoughtium have been, so focused on meeting the marketplace as it continues to shift and change. And I think one of the most exciting things about today's topic, as we take a look at the 2021 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report, which all three of us were joking about. All three of us, this is the one report that we actually print out every year, and I've got it completely marked up, colorful Post-it notes all over it. And this one, has maybe a few more Post-it notes in it this year than it ever has, because there really have been some outstanding shifts in the learning and development space. And before we dive into it, I want to thank you both for being in that work, because I know this year has just been, incredibly challenging and also very exciting for us as learning leaders, because we're going to talk about how our role within organizations, and particularly our role at Thoughtium with our clients, has shifted drastically as the needs of our learners and the needs of our learning organizations have changed. So let's dive into it. Today is all about the future of learning, and we do this every year through a wonderfully designed, executed, and ultimately produced report called the 2021 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. This report began, I believe, 5 years ago was the first publication. It spans across both HR, global talent development, and learning and development. And it really pulls out some of the key shifts that are occurring in the marketplace and identifies very specific skills that are making their way to the top of the list in terms of what we need to focus on in designing and delivering for our audiences. So there's so much to unpack today. But I almost want to, kind of set the stage, and we're going to start with maybe the position of learning and development. One of the things that really stuck out in this report is that this is, and I believe the words in the report were, this is truly L&D's moment. And I don't think I've ever heard that in terms of the state of our industry, of the learning and development industry, as loud and clear as I have over the course of the last few months, as we've been repositioned within organizations to really lead and to really help our people and our learners navigate all of this change. So the punchline of this report is that this is L&D's moment. Our position is extremely important, and it has shifted over the course of this last year. Our learners and those groups within our organizations are also changing, and the pandemic has had a big impact on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the new skills required for our learners to maintain mobility within organizations and really stay engaged. And then finally, we're going to cover off on, as learning practitioners, what can we do? What are some of the things that we can think about to make sure that we create the most inclusive environment for our learning populations? So let's start with the position of L&D. It's more clear today than ever that we as learning professionals have a real opportunity of kind of historical significance. And one of the data points, Melissa, that I want to drill in on is the position of L&D within organizations. And the Workplace Learning Report talks about how today 63% of learning and development professionals agree that L&D has a seat at the executive table. That's a staggering percentage, knowing that just a year ago, March of 20, that number was 24%. Only 24% of us believe that we had a spot at the C-suite. 63% today. So Melissa, tell us a little bit about this shift and what makes up this shift for us as learning and development leaders.
Yeah, no, I love that. This report is just so rich. And, as we've just looked at the report and kind of where the state of the industry is, the world is shifting. We've all felt that over the course of the past year. But I think what's been super unique and what we've all experienced is the velocity of change. It's just unbelievable. And I think with this pandemic, what it brought was a real focus and a glimpse into a testing ground for L&D, really a testing ground around the anticipatory leadership and focus that L&D would need to have. And I think that's been one of the key focus areas as we start to think about how L&D helps the world kind of really navigate the business space. So that's been really interesting. I think that then leads into kind of the L&D professional focus of 66, 63, whatever you said it is, % of individuals are now really focused in on rebuilding and reshaping their organizations. And that to me speaks volumes to where L&D has kind of arrived. It's really focusing in on that strategic kind of place that we're squarely now set at. We're really at that intersection of business and talent development, and we've all been waiting to get there. So I think that's super exciting as well. The other thing that I think was super interesting in the report was just the level of advocacy we're seeing from CEOs. So CEOs now are kind of really advocating and stepping into kind of understanding L&D and really looking at how L&D can be the linchpin to their business strategies. They said the advocacy in this report has doubled. So pre-pandemic, we were at 27%. We're roughly now at 62%, kind of now going through this pandemic phase. I think what that says is we've got the proverbial seat at the table, but we've now stepped into, the CEOs pulled out the chair and said, come on and sit at the head of the table with me. So there's this real partnership, I think, starting to happen. And we're trying to really navigate what that starts to look like. I think also, too, people recognize that learning is no longer, a nice to have, it's a need to have. And they really understand the criticality of that as we've gone through this pandemic. We've been working a lot, and I know Anthony and Madison, we've been kind of doing this together, just in terms of helping organizations really understand how L&D can kind of get pigeonholed into a reactive state. So when we started with the pandemic, we were all put in a reactive state. So that's L&D plus all business functions. We were trying to figure it out together day to day. And I think what we were able to do through the course of this is really find our path strategically and help to really kind of jump ahead and say, here's where we need to be heading. Here's what we're seeing in terms of themes as this pandemic is kind of playing forward. There are some real skill needs. There's some latent skill needs where we can see around the corner. And if you follow us, we'll help you get there in terms of talent development. So that's been exciting. In terms of our client work, when we look at that reactive state, we've really been challenging our clients, particularly more seasoned L&D leaders, on elevating and stepping in comfortably with confidence. We call it creative confidence into the space of sitting with the C-suite and really kind of wrestling with these really challenging strategic and talent problems. And I think what that's done is given us kind of way to label some of these strategic focus areas. So we've been talking a lot about the power of our L&D value proposition and how L&D needs to bring that to bear. And we've also been talking about the importance of articulating business need and impact and drawing a line to that very visibly for your stakeholders. So I think bringing the clients along in this way of elevating L&D in alignment with what we're seeing in terms of the survey, we're really trying to not only elevate these practitioners, but help them really elevate the impact they can have within their organization. So that's been really great.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what I'm hearing you say is like, with the greater need for us to be at the table comes a greater responsibility for us to develop those skills in strategic partnership, which is something that's really exciting. It's almost like be careful of what you ask for.
Yes.
For decades, right? We've been asking for a seat at the table. Now that we have it, it requires, real skill, real focus, real communication skills, the ability to communicate our value proposition, and most importantly, the ability to maintain those relationships. So yeah, I appreciate that perspective. So Madison, we want to bring you in. What are some of the other ways that L&D is elevating, and how have you experienced that out in the marketplace?
Yeah, well, first I want to reflect back. Something that's, I think, really interesting about this time is that we are kind of at an influx of, we have been in the strategic position. Now, the world is continuing to shape and reshape new normals and the way that we work as well. So, we were there because there were dire needs in the workplace to work on things like resilience, like digital fluency, like cross-functional collaboration in the digital space. So, we were kind of thrust in there, and now it's the moment to stay there, to stay relevant, to create strategies, to form partnerships. So it's, it is L&D's moment, but it's not a given. There are so many things that, we need to step up to the plate for as well. One of the, most critical things is if we're playing at the C-suite level, we need to, for all the work that we're doing, have a demonstrated impact in the results that we're getting. So what that comes through as is learning measurement. Everything that we're doing, we need to be measuring the impact on the employee experience, how people are reporting how much they've learned, if people are enjoying the learning process and coming back to it, be it in online courses or virtual instructor-led, or like joining a learning group with your peers. So staying, I think, at that C-suite level will really take a lot of measurement. I think another way to really step up to the plate is to really get close to the business and really focus on those partnerships. So, it's when you come forward and say, hey, I'm developing training, what you should start with is, hey, I'm looking to address this business need. Training is the way we're doing it, and this is the impact that it's going to have. So there's a little bit there about, how to take advantage of this moment. And that's definitely how to stay there rather than just, let this moment, I'd say, pass us by. In terms of, I would say, some other ways that L&D can really step up, I would say, being a step or two ahead of understanding the interpersonal skills that will be required in the new ways that we work, especially around how people are leading in this new world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting again. It's almost like, we were called to the strategic table out of necessity. Yeah. It highlighted a lot of the impact that, we were driving on kind of the ground level, and it increased our responsibility to connect, drive value, and measure it. And, Madison, I really appreciate you bringing measurement into the discussion. It's always a part of the discussion. It's one of those really tough kind of topics because a lot of learning leaders have different kind of philosophies and different approaches. But it's almost as if today, more than ever, there's a need to measure the impact because we're bringing in new skills. We're designing for completely different problems outside of your standard onboarding and product training. And L&D is now more a part of the entire employee. And the report talks about how one way that organizations are starting to measure L&D now is by way of the engagement survey, which is typically an HR hosted tool that calls on folks kind of general communication, their general happiness within the organization. They're feeling supported and managed appropriately. But now we're asking folks, do you feel like you have the tools and the skills you need for your next role? Do you feel like you have the tools and the skills you need to thrive? And I think the report talked about an 11-point increase in L&D becoming an anchor foundation to that engagement survey, which is great because yes, we can measure L&D by our satisfaction data. Was this training effective? Do you feel like it has an impact on your role? But when we start to incorporate it in more of that corporate level engagement survey, we start to see its impact on culture. We start to see its impact on hard skills. We start to see managers realizing the benefits of either folks elevating and developing new skills. And so it almost brings even more importance, but also potentially more opportunity to the way that we measure for our learning experiences. So yeah, thanks for adding that.
I would love to dive into that for a second longer. So
let's do it.
In the report, it definitely talks about the massive increase in online learning and virtual instructor-led learning. So many L&D professionals who used to be in a conference room or a classroom and, in their live with people, walking around to different tables, working on, in-person, collaboration. Now that's virtual, and it's a split between self-paced online and, people take themselves through it, or virtual instructor led with maybe a few touch points over a few weeks. So I think with that being the shift, there are so many more digital touch points now that I think that L&D as a whole should challenge itself on the conception that, measurement is hard to do in this space. Because when people are joining the meetings, when people are logging on online repetitively and going back there, that is a whole new measurement tool that really wasn't as much. It was slightly in play, but not as much in the past. But now, because that's one of the main modes of learning, we can measure those things, and we should be, working with our LMS or wherever our stuff is hosted to say, how can I measure this?
Absolutely, I love that. With more channels come more ways to measure, and that's a great byproduct of this virtual first environment. Awesome. Thank you both for stepping in. I want to maybe move on to the core of this report is really around trends. And the report does a really good job of surfacing both macro level trends that are affecting L&D. I think we talked about a few of them. Organizations are embracing L&D, not just having a seat at the table, but also really running point on major transformational initiatives, including the continuity of our teams in a virtual first environment, learning measurement becoming more important. But each year, the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report identifies the top 20 skills that our learners are seeking on a regular basis. And this tells us more specifically not only the interests of our learners, but those capabilities that we need to be driving in our offerings. And you look at this list of top 20 from year to year, and you see a common core of soft skills. This year, more than ever, though, we saw a drastic change at the top. And over the course of, I believe, the last 2 or 3 years, the number one skill, sought after skill in learners in the workforce was creativity. Interestingly, creativity fell completely off the list. And I'd love for either of you two to kind of comment on that in the year that we've had, that was 2020 to 2021. But we're also going to talk about 3 emerging skills that made it to the top 3. And those skills are resilience, digital proficiency, and I would just comment on kind of our general excitement or need to upskill, right? So resilience and proficiency made their way to the top 3. These are 2 brand new skills that I want to touch on in just a moment. But the report talks about upskilling, people's ability to develop what they call adjacent skills. And upskilling being a really good vehicle for inward mobility, which is now becoming even more important to folks within organizations. So let's dive into these new skills of the future employee. But let's first, talk a little bit about the changing behaviors of today's employee. And Madison, I'll have you start. Internal mobility and choice are really at an all-time high. So can you speak to just the general behaviors of today's employee and why internal mobility made its way to the forefront of this report?
Yeah. I would say that this was one of the most surprising parts about the report for me. I really stay in the, learning experience and thinking about, what people's experience are like and untapping new skills. And I'm scratching the surface on the, how people move throughout organizations and what it looks like to grow your careers. So I was really fascinated by this internal mobility piece. And when I really started to reflect on why this might be happening, what I thought about was it has been an insane year since all of this happened. And if companies are doing a really good job of taking care of their employees, then those employees are even more incentivized and connected to that company because, they went through a hard time together. So I think that's something that's impacting internal mobility. There's also just the benefits of stability and familiarity of having relationships that are established with a company. I would also say that there's probably ease when you go from one position in a company to another, in that, you already know the culture, you know what to expect, you have people that can help you out. So you're able to step into that new role, even if the skills are somewhat or very different from your past role, then, that learning curve that comes with who am I and how do I exist within this company, it's not as big. It might be for a new team, but people are really able to invest in their learning in that space around like specific skills. So I think that's a really exciting part about internal mobility. It's also great, of course, for the company as well. They're less, of the process of hiring and worrying about retention and things like that. So that's kind of, I'd say possibly like why internal mobility is happening. But in terms of how people are actually taking on the switches in internal mobility, the report gave us some great insights about how upskilling and reskilling is easier now than it's ever been before. People have a number of resources, of course, at our fingertips, as well as opportunities to collaborate with people in other industries or other roles to just, hear about what it takes to be successful there. Think, could I be successful there? So I think that there's a big sense of, hey, I can teach myself. I would also say that I can teach myself mentality might have been like an outcome of the past year. People taught themselves how to, the bread was sourdough, the bread that like got super popular, right? People probably never would have thought I could make sourdough before, but then all of a sudden, you see someone online doing it, there's a video and you take it on yourself. So when you get those repetitions of having no skills to, oh my gosh, I can do this, then that I think also builds a sense of confidence and maybe even curiosity about like what else you can do. Another, I think, big influence for internal mobility would be manager involvement. Does your manager support you finding the best career path within a company? Are they saying, hey, yes, you want to move in this direction. Let's invest in your skills in that area. Let's make that a part of your development plan. What's interesting is about 40% of people reported that managers are invested in helping them like grow a new skill, and that's a part of their development plan. So to really, I'd say, like tap into the benefits of internal mobility, managers should be invested in helping people grow their careers. Through, like, skill building.
Yeah, I love the sourdough kind of comment. One of the things that we've talked about as a team is, as you read this report, you realize that these trends are not so much new as much as they are really amplified in the world that we've been living in over the course of the last year. And when you talk about our ability, even just as humans, to learn and to adapt and to take on new skills, we've had to do that in our daily life. Everything from parents having to juggle children at home while managing a job, to folks that just have now much more expendable time to develop new interests and skills. And it's almost like, how can this not? And you combine that with the fact that the lines have really been blurred between our place of work and our place of home. If not, they were completely demolished. So it's almost like, how can you not apply some of that same agility, that learning agility, to the way that you become more curious about your next role, or potentially taking on a role that you never thought you would before. So I appreciate you bringing forward that perspective. So Melissa, I want to bring you in here because I talked about kind of the top 20 capabilities of the future learner. And the top 2 this year were resilience and what they call digital fluency. These took the place of, again, number 1, creativity, which I'd love for you to comment on, like, why do we believe that creativity maybe fell off the list? And 2, talk about resilience and digital fluency and why they are so important today, and why we as learning leaders should really be thinking about these skills.
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just circle back to the last topic because I've got a burning point I want to make.
That's why we're here.
Madison made just a really good point around kind of that L&D space and kind of how we've contained ourselves at times into that L&D space, and how she's starting to branch out and understand how learning impacts other areas. I think there's a need to start to blur the lines in terms of how we develop talent. And, as we look at just kind of these adjacent skills and just kind of looking at specifically the choice that's available. I think it's going to be really important for us as L&D practitioners to focus in on how do we make that choice deliberate, or help learners make choice deliberate, and then how do we translate those adjacent skills into real opportunities for that mobility to happen. I just think there's a real opportunity there for L&D to start to kind of drive some of that, because otherwise there's opportunity lost in terms of all these great skills that people are learning, and we might not be able to find those in the organization when they're right under our nose. So I just wanted to at least make that point. I thought it was super important. So let's return to resiliency and just digital fluency. And I know you had the point about creativity as well. It's interesting because I think creativity has kind of a framing and a definition to it that people think about when they use the term creativity. And it's interesting, if it were defined in maybe a different way, I wonder if it might make it more at the top of the list, because I think we all had to be super creative in terms of how we thought about navigating work, how we applied our skills and capabilities within this past year. I think that it fell just simply because there were more important topics like resilience and digital fluency that were more top of mind and kind of in our face in terms of needs. I think it's important to note when we talk about resilience, I think the definition of this has really changed. So back in the day when I was doing a lot of competency modeling, I think resilience was always, your ability to bounce back from setbacks. And I think we've learned resiliency this year has been so much more. I think it's really about navigating and, really kind of processing things as you're going through circumstances, challenges, and issues. So how do you do that real time for yourself, but also for others? And how do you take what you're processing and then apply it to really have momentum to move forward? So I think the definition's shifting and broadening. I think L&D has stepped into this space in terms of creating resiliency by number one, kind of putting skill building and capabilities in place that help people not only just cope and survive, but really thrive. So really kind of morph their skills in a way that really drives themselves, the organization, and their teams. I also think too, resilience is not just been relegated to you as an individual, but as a manager. Madison, you've talked about kind of the manager role. Managers stepping in and recognizing that I not only have to be resilient, I have to also figure out how to make my teams resilient, and how do we move through and kind of provide that nurturing and care to our people. So I think there's a lot of different facets there. Too, I think the other piece is we thought about resilience and really looked at that. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was how do we help serve a lot of our commercial organizations that were going through kind of this pivot in terms of sales and not being able to walk in and really connect, from a field sales perspective with your customers and clients. And what we started to think about is how can we build in kind of this resilience factor for you as an individual to figure out how do you navigate this and kind of come into a sales environment in a different way, especially maybe virtually. And part of that was really around starting to build kind of an awareness of where are you at personally with your emotions, how do those impact you, what you're feeling, what's your orientation and preference in terms of communication, how might you need to pivot that. I think we spent a lot of time kind of connecting then that to an others orientation. So for our field sales reps, how do you need to step into a space with another individual, and how do you connect virtually? How do you connect and make sure that you're really kind of reaching out and understanding where the person might be and how resilient they may or may not be in that given day. So we spent a lot of time starting to build out agility, influence, and then resilience within some of our programs. So I think that was an important piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I know you asked about digital fluency too. I think digital transformation, the report called that out specifically, and I think did a really nice job of discerning between fluency and transformation being more the act of implementing technology and implementing systems, where fluency is more about kind of the skill gaps and capability that needs to be developed. For us, I think as L&D practitioners, when digital transformation kind of hit the market, which is probably, 3 to 5 years ago, depending on what space you're in, I think we were really kind of riding alongside these big digital implementations, and we were just making sure that people could understand, acknowledge, and use the technology. I think now where we're really stepping in is how do we enable people to really understand what skills and capabilities they need to integrate, that technology into their day-to-day to make their work and their process more efficient and more effective. A lot of the interesting client work we're doing is stepping into the space with our our clients to help them understand how do they add digital into their specific L&D strategy? How do they leverage that effectively? We've been talking to our clients a lot about maturity models. Like, where are you at right now, and where are your clients at in terms of sitting within digital transformation, and how far can they really go? How do we phase them through implementation of different technologies that they might want to use to support learning? We've had some conversations about virtual reality as an example, and what the benefits of that are, but if you push it too hard, too fast, kind of how it can curtail the learning and get in the way. And then we've also talked to just about kind of our focus on digital fluency and really helping our clients figure out what are the capabilities and the needs. How are we identifying gaps with our clients so that they can step into the space and develop the right skills and abilities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think even just the difference between digital transformation and fluency. Fluency being the skills and capabilities that are needed to not just absorb, but also to elevate and to skill up on some of these new technologies. That's super important, and it's a whole separate bucket of training focus and training content for us as learning professionals. Madison, it looked like you maybe wanted to add something as well.
Yes. What came to mind when I was reading this was the line that said, you know, it used to be understood that you needed to reskill or upskill every 5 years, and now that's getting much shorter. So when we're thinking about digital fluency, you almost think it might not be, yes, we need to get everyone up to a certain point of understanding the technology that we're using today, but training should also be around how do you teach yourself new technology? How do you step up and teach yourself something that's super unique to your role, and there might not be training about it? There's kind of a growth mindset that needs to be instilled so that people can stay up to pace on what is needed digitally today. So it's kind of like we need to do a great level set, I think, right now across everyone in terms of these skills. Mm-hmm. And then the next wave is all of this will continue to change. How do we continue to stay ahead of it? And I don't think that you can do a great level set every 5 years. I think that there needs to be, things that are pretty custom to where different people are.
Yeah. The common thread here is change, and the common focus, or the real focus of this report, is L&D as a change agent. From everywhere from our new position within the organization as a strategic partner, our requirements in terms of the way that we're enabling and supporting the employee of today, one who is much more multifaceted, learning adjacent skills, potentially thinking about the next job, and valuing upward and inward mobility more than ever. Digital fluency, resilience, two maybe well-known terms that have been made very real as the required, what they call power skills of the future learner. I want to maybe close with a topic that also came up in this report, and I thought LinkedIn did an incredible job of really shining light on diversity inclusion as not just a responsibility, but a real opportunity for learning professionals to step up and to support a more diverse and inclusive work environment. The report talks about how the fact that we are positioned now as more of a change agent, gives us more of a priority to deliver D&I initiatives that really make sense and really impact the organization. In fact, I believe the report talked about how D&I programming would be the number 2 or number 3 programming that we would be delivering in 2021. And I know that's fairly new to us learning and development professionals, in that is typically, again, more of an HR function that has become all of our responsibility organization-wide. And so, Melissa, I want to maybe start with you, and let's talk about, D&I, its maybe new position within organizations, and how we as learning leaders, as change agents, can not only support, but take responsibility for a more inclusive workplace.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited about this. Out of the whole report, I think this was one of the pieces where I think the opportunity is so great. And we've all experienced the past year and just recognize the importance of this topic. And it's a hard topic, right? We haven't gotten it right over multiple years. And so I think a lot of people are talking about this. What I love is just the fact that there's a space where L&D can now step into this. I think the report said there's roughly 28% of organizations surveyed, are partnering with a D&I kind of function focus and stepping into that as L&D practitioners, but there's still work to do. What I think is really important is, number one, thinking about how we can enable D&I within the organization and build more diverse, inclusive cultures. What are the skills and capabilities and the programming needed? But I also think it's us as L&D practitioners to figure out, how do you take some of these capabilities and model them within our learning situations and our learning programs? How do you build in inclusive practices within your learning programs and platforms? So I think there's a true pronged focus here for sure. I think just in terms of us here at Thoughtium, I know we've been talking a lot about diversity and inclusion and trying to unpack this and really figure out what makes it so hard, number one. I know a lot of my clients that I've been speaking to say that they're grappling with this. They've been grappling with it for years, and they're looking for practical solutions, ways to really kind of turn the corner on this in some way where people can kind of tangibly get behind it and make some kind of movement in it. And I know for us at Thoughtium, we've been talking a lot about just inclusion is really kind of the gateway, if you will, to a lot of the pieces of diversity, a lot of the pieces in terms of engagement. So a lot of the things that we're moving after and want to move the needle on that are challenging, starting with inclusion and really allowing people to become authentic in terms of stepping into the workplace in kind of the full whole self that they are. That becomes really important, and that really opens up, I think, the ability to harness the power of diversity to really drive engagement. Because if people feel comfortable and feel included and there's a sense of belonging, they're tending to step in and really kind of engage in the workforce in a different way. We've talked a little bit about how this is really kind of the link to value. So it kind of starts with you understanding kind of your values personally, what's important to you, how you show those at work and how you talk about those at work, but also kind of then stepping into the alignment with your teams and understanding what team values are and the organizational values are, and having discussions around those alignments or those complements, driving kind of culture shaping and culture not necessarily fitting, but culture add is one of our colleagues likes to talk about. So how do we start to kind of bring this to the forefront as L&D practitioners and put some projects, programs, practices in place that really start to allow people to test on this and move the needle in meaningful ways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the truth of the matter is we are at a point right now where we're also designing for a more diverse workplace.
Yes.
I know a lot of our client organizations have made some pretty significant headways in the D&I space. And again, not just by spinning up a new initiative, but by truly bringing in a more diverse, more global, broader skilled workforce. And so it's almost like, as this shift takes place from, a recruiting and a people perspective, again, we have this responsibility to now design for more of an inclusive workspace. And, one of the things that the report talks about is supporting Gen Z as they become, more a bigger part of who we are as organizations. And Madison, I'm curious for you, as we look at Gen Z, the report says 2 words: career growth, in terms of, kind of what they're incented for. But, from your perspective, how do we design for Gen Z? How do we support and enable our younger learners? And how do we continue to drive inclusivity in our learning experiences?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I think this happens every 10 years. It's like, oh my gosh, that generation is all of a sudden a huge part of it,
Right. So it used to be millennials.
I know. They are like the majority now. And there's a new wave.
Yeah.
So Gen Z, a couple just highlights on them. They are digital natives and they are career driven. So digital natives, meaning that they have, had Google at their fingertips their whole lives. And they have been able to if going back to the sourdough example, if I
was just going to say, they're the ones baking sourdough.
Exactly. They're the ones who say, oh, I need to learn how to make a loaf of bread. Okay, I'll teach myself in 30 minutes. Not like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I guess I won't do it. So this group that, being digitally native are used to, if I have an idea or have something that I want to learn about, I can go and teach it to myself. And that expectation needs to carry forward into the workplace as well. If I'm going into a client meeting and I am going to negotiate a scope increase, I might want to brush up on my negotiation skills. And if, the learning practice has an opportunity for me to develop on that and best practices for my company, then I'm going to be tapping into that resource. So that's one big need for addressing Gen Z. I also think that really boost the accessibility to knowledge across the organization. So it's not like who you know and what teams you've been on, but people can really be level set on critical skills to working there. The other piece is really around career growth. This attitude for learning and willingness to seek to learn something, to self-teach themselves. They're bringing that forward into their career growth. So this group is really willing to learn and really eager to grow as well, especially grow in areas, like I said, where they're not experts yet. So they're willing to take that on and know that they can learn anything that they put their mind to.
Yeah, and the report also talked about how do we support more of an inclusive learning experience, and it talked about social learning. And I'm just curious, Madison, I know you've been so deep in the design space, particularly as we've supported the flip to more of a virtual learning experience, and we've started to enable our organizations to see that that's way more so. It's more than just taking an agenda and turning it into a handful of Zoom meetings, right? We've been deep in the work of creating these progressive, more social learning experiences. And I'm just curious as to, what has your experience been designing for more of a social learning experience? Yeah. And how do we do that? What are some best practices?
There's two things at play that I think it's so important that people don't misconstrue. Online learning and virtual learning is increasing, but that does not mean that social learning is going away. Social learning is so important, if anything, even more important than ever before. So some ways specifically that we really bring social learning into, especially our work, is it's the way that we sequence learning. So in the past, if it was a 6-hour in-person workshop, now that's broken up into 3 2-hour workshops. But instead of it being, a talking head on a screen saying things to you like you might in a classroom, instead, that instruction, that learning a completely new topic, that needs to happen before. So someone can read something, they can watch a video, listen to a podcast, any of those things. When people do get time over Zoom, that time should be interactive. People should be practicing, having conversations about the topics. That is really where people can say, okay, I learned about this before. Now I get to try it out, and I get to learn from other people as I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The platform itself, all of these platforms have great functionality for getting people more involved, not just by speaking up, but by chatting in, taking polls, doing breakout rooms, talking one-on-one. There's a ton of interaction that we can build in, and we should be building in. But I would say it should not stop there. You've learned a little bit, you've gotten to practice. So how do you apply it? And how do you really integrate it into what matters to you on the job? In one of our offerings, situational intelligence, we've implemented learning cohorts. And that is when a subset from a larger group gets together and they run through questions about how they are taking what they learned in that home study and workshop and integrating it on the job, how it's going, what they're struggling with, and just continuing to learn from each other. So the opportunities that we have, we should not be talking heads, we should be facilitators of dialogue and practicing.
Mm-hmm. And I love the differentiation between virtual learning and social learning. Just because it's virtual doesn't mean that it's social. This is also why I love this episode every year, because this report, covers everything from the clouds to the dirt in learning and development. So I love that, like, we started this episode at kind of the future of learning and our new seat at the C-suite. And we ended it with very, very specific tactics that support how we design and deliver in a virtual learning experience. At the end of the day, this is L&D's moment. It was made very clear in the 2021 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. And it's also been made very clear in the work that we do every day as learning leaders. And I hope that those folks who tune in and that have been a part of this 45 minutes of content can relate to a lot of what's happening and coming to us in terms of opportunities and new challenges. But also, I really hope that you all, the learning and development community, can take a lot of pride at being at the center of so much change and so much opportunity. There has never been a better time to be an L&D professional. The demand of our employees is shifting and it's increasing, which makes our role so much more valuable and meaningful. And we have a real opportunity to drive change through our organizations, making more of a diverse and an inclusive workforce. These are callings that I am so excited to take on. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have both of you at my side as we continue to navigate the L&D community and support the L&D community in any way that we can. So first and foremost, Melissa and Madison, I want to thank you both for your practitionership. I want to thank you for your partnership and also your perspective today.
Thank you so much. This has been great to dive into these things and really unpack this with both of you.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Very fun. We got to do it again very soon.
I know, I want to do this.
There's so much more.
There is so much more. Speaking of so much more, this term practitionership, we love it here at Thoughtium. It is what drives us every day. It is what refocuses us and anchors us on the work that it takes to be able to come forward and share in such an important perspective. And when you think about practitionership as a learning leader, I know that there is so much that we have to continue to build, and so many skills that we have to continue to build in ourselves as learning leaders. We have an offering that we've brought to market over the course of the last 6 to 8 months that really helps support and build deeper levels of practitionership, particularly in 3 emerging areas. And we're so excited that all 3 of these areas of practitionership for learning leaders have shown up, not just in the LinkedIn report, but really in just the marketplace. Designing for impact. How we design for today's learners is a lot different than it was 12 months ago, and in some cases even 6 months ago. Building strategic partnerships with our new responsibility at the C-suite. What does it look like for us to maintain and develop and enhance those relationships that matter most to the ultimate impact of our learning and development offerings? And facilitation. It's so interesting. I make this comment to anybody, including Melissa and Madison, who share this platform with me. There's no way that we would be doing this a year ago. There's just no way. Even us as a small consulting firm that really takes pride in pushing the paradigm and demonstrating our creative confidence, there's just no way that we'd be in a world that we could broadcast to our entire learning and development community with a push of a button. And that takes new skills and the ability to be able to deliver the knowledge and the information, and as Madison mentioned, make it more than just virtual, but make it truly social and meaningful. And so mastering facilitation is the 3rd component or the 3rd phase to our learning accelerator. This is a 90-day accelerated experience for learning professionals. These are for you folks who are at the center of this work, where the responsibility and the opportunity is greater today than ever before. This is your opportunity to go deeper in these skills, and we would absolutely love to have you a part of one of these 90-day experiences. We do mixed cohorts, and we also do intact cohorts within organizations to support your learning practitionership and to increase your ability to have a lot of fun and make impact. So we appreciate everybody tuning in. If you'd like more information on these topics or the Learning Accelerator, feel free to reach out to me. My information is below. Madison, Melissa, thank you so much for sitting here at the table today and being such a big part of our voice out in the community. And we will look forward to seeing everybody a week from Thursday. We're going to take next Thursday off for spring break, and we'll be back with a new April series a week from Thursday. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the afternoon. So long.